I never thought I would end up in a courtroom over a fender bender in my own neighborhood. But that was before I met Patricia Hendricks, president of the Meadowbrook Hills Homeowners Association in Boise, Idaho. It was January 15th, one of those bitter winter mornings where the temperature hovered around 12 degrees and everything outside was coated in a thick layer of ice. I had just finished loading some old furniture into my Ford F-150 to take to the donation center. My name is Ryan Edwards, and I had lived in Meadowbrook Hills for 3 years without much trouble from the HOA, aside from the occasional passive-aggressive note about my garbage cans being visible from the street for more than 2 hours after pickup. But that morning would change everything. I backed out of my driveway slowly, being extra careful because the road was essentially a skating rink. The city had salted the main roads, but our residential streets were always last on their list. I had my window cracked open slightly, listening for any sounds of approaching vehicles since visibility around my driveway was always a bit tricky with the large evergreen hedge my neighbor insisted on maintaining. The truck's tires crunched on the frozen snow as I eased backward at maybe 2 miles per hour, constantly checking all my mirrors. That was when I heard the engine revving. Before I could even process what was happening, I felt a solid impact against the rear driver's side of my truck. The collision was not hard enough to deploy airbags, but it was definitely forceful enough to jolt me forward against my seat belt. I immediately put the truck in park and jumped out, my boots nearly sliding out from under me on the ice. Patricia Hendricks was already out of her silver Lexus SUV, her face red with rage that had nothing to do with the cold. She was a woman in her mid-50s with short blonde hair styled in that classic "I want to speak to the manager" cut. She wore a long camel-colored coat that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "What the hell do you think you were doing?" she shrieked at me before I could even ask if she was okay. "You backed right into me. You were driving recklessly in reverse." I stood there, momentarily stunned by the accusation. I looked at my truck, then at her Lexus. The damage was clear as day. My rear bumper had a small dent, but her front bumper was crumpled and her hood had a noticeable crease. The physics of the situation could not have been more obvious. She had rear-ended me. "Patricia, you hit me," I said, trying to keep my voice calm and level. "I was backing out slowly and you came down the street and crashed into my truck." "That is absolutely not what happened." She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures. "You were flying backward without looking. I was driving perfectly normally down the street when you shot out of your driveway in reverse like a maniac." I could not believe what I was hearing. The woman had rear-ended my stationary or near-stationary vehicle, and she was trying to blame me. I pulled out my own phone and started documenting the scene. The position of the vehicles told the whole story. My truck was barely out of my driveway, still mostly in front of my own property. Her Lexus was angled slightly toward the curb, clearly showing she had swerved trying to avoid the collision, but had been going too fast for the icy conditions. "We need to call the police and file a report," I said, already dialing. "Oh, we are definitely calling the police," Patricia snapped. "And I am reporting you for reckless driving. Do you know who I am? I am the HOA president, and I have been documenting your violations for months. This is just the final straw." I had no idea what she was talking about. "What violations?" "Your truck is too tall for neighborhood standards. You park it in your driveway instead of your garage, creating an eyesore. Your lawn had dandelions last summer, and just last week, your garbage cans were still out at noon on Thursday." She counted each supposed infraction on her fingers like she was reciting a grocery list. The police dispatcher answered, and I reported the accident, giving our location. Patricia was on her own phone, presumably doing the same thing, but I could hear her dramatic retelling of events. According to her version, I had reversed at high speed without warning and deliberately struck her vehicle. While we waited for the police to arrive, two of my neighbors came out to see what had happened. Bill Morrison from across the street and Janet Chen from next door both approached cautiously, navigating the icy sidewalk carefully. "Everyone okay?" Bill called out. He was a retired firefighter, mid-60s, with a salt and pepper beard. "We are fine, Bill, but this man rear-ended me with his truck," Patricia said immediately, beating me to any explanation. Janet looked at the scene, then at me with confusion. "Ryan, were you backing out?" "Yes, I was backing out of my driveway very slowly because of the ice. Patricia came down the street and hit me." "That is not true." Patricia's voice went up an octave. "Janet, you know me. Would I lie about something like this?" Janet looked uncomfortable. She was newer to the neighborhood than I was, and I could see her weighing the politics of contradicting the HOA president. "I just heard the crash and came out. I did not see what happened." Bill, however, was studying the vehicles with a trained eye. "Patricia, the damage pattern shows Ryan's truck was hit from behind. Your front end is damaged, his rear end is damaged." "Because he backed into me," Patricia insisted. "He was going in reverse." "On his own property, backing out of his own driveway," Bill said calmly. "That's legal. Even if he was in reverse, you still hit the back of his vehicle with the front of yours. That's pretty much textbook rear-ending." Patricia's face turned an even deeper shade of red. "Bill, I would expect you to be unbiased in this situation, but I see you men are going to stick together." Bill held up his hands. "I am just saying what the physical evidence shows." Two Boise Police Department cruisers arrived within 15 minutes, which was faster than I expected given the icy conditions throughout the city. Two officers got out, both wearing heavy jackets over their uniforms. The older of the two, Officer Martinez according to his name tag, approached us while his younger partner began setting up cones to redirect what little traffic was attempting to navigate our street. "Who called in the accident?" Officer Martinez asked. "I did," both Patricia and I said simultaneously. He nodded. "Okay, so both parties called. Anyone injured?" "No injuries," I confirmed. "I have whiplash," Patricia said suddenly, rubbing her neck. "I am going to need medical attention." Officer Martinez made a note. "Do you want us to call an ambulance, madam?" She hesitated. "No, I will see my own doctor, but I want it on record that I am injured because of his reckless driving." The officer looked at me. "Can you tell me what happened, sir?" I explained the situation clearly and calmly. I had been backing out of my driveway at a very slow speed due to icy conditions. I had checked all my mirrors and had my window open to listen for approaching vehicles. I was still mostly in my driveway when I felt the impact from behind. Patricia had been driving down the residential street and struck the rear of my truck with the front of her vehicle. Patricia immediately launched into her competing narrative. According to her, she had been driving at an appropriate speed down the street when I shot backward out of my driveway without looking, and she could not stop in time due to the ice. Officer Martinez looked at the scene, walked around both vehicles, and took several photographs. His partner was interviewing Bill and Janet separately. After about 10 minutes of examination, the officers conferred with each other privately before Officer Martinez returned to us. Based on the point of impact, the damage pattern, and the final position of the vehicles, it appears that Miss Hendricks's vehicle struck the rear of Mr. Edwards's truck, he said officially. "Mr. Edwards, even though you were in reverse, you were still on or immediately adjacent to your own property, conducting a normal backing maneuver from your driveway. Miss Hendricks, You were traveling down the street and struck the rear of his vehicle with your front end. But he was going backward, Patricia protested. That does not change the fact that you rear-ended him, madam, Officer Martinez said patiently. If a vehicle is backing out of a driveway and you are approaching on the street, you have a duty to slow down or stop to avoid a collision, especially in icy conditions. The driver in the rear position is typically at fault in these situations. Patricia's mouth fell open. This is ridiculous. I demand to speak to your supervisor. You are welcome to file a complaint, madam, but that would not change the accident report. He was already writing on his citation pad. I am issuing you a citation for failure to maintain control of your vehicle and following too closely. Following too closely. I was not following anyone. You were traveling too close behind Mr. Edwards's vehicle to stop safely, which resulted in a collision. That meets the definition of the violation in this context. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. The officer was seeing through Patricia's false narrative, but I should have known it would not be that simple. Patricia snatched the citation from Officer Martinez with a look of pure fury. "This is not over," she said to me. "Not by a long shot. You have been violating HOA regulations for months, and this accident is just proof of the kind of reckless person you are. Consider this your final warning." "Warning about what?" I asked. "I have not violated anything." "You are in violation of Section 4.7 of the HOA bylaws regarding vehicle storage, Section 8.2 regarding lawn maintenance, and Section 11.3 regarding waste management container visibility. And now I am adding reckless endangerment to that list. You cannot just make up violations," I said. "And the police report clearly shows you hit me." She leaned in close, lowering her voice so the officers could not hear. "Do you know how much power the HOA has over your property? I can make your life a living hell. I can fine you, put liens on your house, and make sure you never have a moment of peace in this neighborhood. All you had to do was follow the rules, but you think you are special." Officer Martinez called out, asking if we needed anything else. Patricia straightened up, plastering on a fake smile. "No, officer, we are just exchanging insurance information." We completed the exchange, though Patricia practically threw her insurance card at me. The police finished their report and left, followed shortly by Bill and Janet. Bill gave me an encouraging nod as he headed back to his house. I stood in my driveway for a moment after everyone had left, looking at the damage to my truck. It was not severe, but it would need repair. More concerning was the look of vindictive determination I had seen in Patricia's eyes. I had heard stories about HOAs gone rogue, but I had always thought Meadowbrook Hills was relatively reasonable. I was about to learn just how wrong I was. 3 days after the accident, I received a certified letter from the Meadowbrook Hills HOA. Inside was a formal notice of violation, listing 5 separate infractions. First, unauthorized vehicle storage, claiming my truck exceeded the height limits specified in the CC and Articus. Second, lawn maintenance failure from 7 months prior. Third, improper waste container placement from the previous week. Fourth, and this was new, failure to maintain approved driveway surface conditions, claiming I had not properly de-iced my driveway, which contributed to the recent vehicular incident. And fifth, creating a public nuisance through reckless operation of a motor vehicle within the community. Each violation carried a fine of $250, totaling $1,250. The letter stated I had 10 days to pay or request a hearing with the HOA board. Furthermore, if the fines were not paid within 30 days, the HOA would place a lien on my property. I could not believe what I was reading. I immediately dug out my copy of the HOA CC and Articus, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions that govern the neighborhood. I had read through them when I bought the house, but I had not looked at them in years. After 2 hours of reading through the dense legal language, I confirmed what I suspected. The vehicle height restriction Patricia cited was for vehicles permanently stored in driveways for more than 72 consecutive hours. My truck was parked in my driveway every night, but I drove it daily for work. It was not being stored. The lawn maintenance clause only applied to violations lasting more than 2 weeks, and I had taken care of the dandelions within days of them appearing. The waste container rule said containers must be removed from street view within 24 hours of pickup, and mine had been back in my side yard well within that time frame. As for the de-icing claim, there was no such requirement in the CC and Articus. And the reckless operation charge was completely fabricated, contradicted by the official police report. I called the HOA management company the next morning. A bored-sounding woman named Susan answered and took my information. I received a violation notice that I believe is incorrect, I explained. I would like to dispute these charges. You will need to request a hearing with the board. I can schedule that for you. The next board meeting is February 10th at 7 in the evening. That was almost a month away. Is there anything sooner? These fines are due in 10 days. The fines are suspended pending the hearing outcome if you request a hearing within the deadline, Susan said in a rehearsed tone. Would you like me to schedule you? Yes, please. You will receive a confirmation letter within 5 business days. Is there anything else? Can you tell me who is on the HOA board? She rattled off 5 names. Patricia Hendricks was president. The vice president was Deborah Stanton. The other 3 members were Michael Porter, Christine Walsh, and Thomas Borg. I recognized some of the names from neighborhood gatherings, but I did not know any of them personally. After hanging up, I decided I needed professional help. I had a friend from college, Marcus Webb, who had become a real estate attorney. He practiced in Nampa, just outside Boise. I gave him a call and explained the situation. Man, that sounds like HOA retaliation, Marcus said after listening to my story. The accident happens, the police report says she was at fault, and suddenly you are drowning in violation notices. That's textbook. Can she do this? She can try, but if the violations are bogus, you have grounds to fight them. And if you can prove retaliation, you might have a case for harassment. Do you have the police report yet? I requested a copy. Should have it in a few days. Good, get that and document everything. Every interaction with the HOA, every letter, every email. If she escalates, we want a clear paper trail. Also, start reading up on Idaho HOA law. There are some protections for homeowners, but HOAs do have considerable power if their CC and Articus are well written. That is what worries me. Listen, attend this hearing and present your case clearly. Bring copies of the CC and Articus with your interpretations highlighted. Bring the police report. Be calm and factual. If the board is reasonable, they will drop this. And if they are not reasonable, then we escalate. But let's hope it does not come to that. Over the next 3 weeks, I prepared for the hearing like I was preparing for trial. I made copies of every relevant document. I created a timeline of events. I printed out photographs of my truck showing it was a stock Ford F-150 with no lift kit, well within normal vehicle height ranges. I obtained repair estimates for my truck from 3 different body shops. I got a written statement from Bill Morrison describing what he observed at the accident scene. The police report arrived and was even better than I hoped. Officer Martinez had written a clear, detailed description of the accident scene. explicitly stating that Patricia had rear-ended my truck, and that the icy conditions combined with her speed were the primary factors. He noted that I had been operating my vehicle in a safe and legal manner. There was even a note that Patricia had been argumentative and resistant to accepting responsibility for the collision. I also did something else. I installed a dash cam in my truck, one with front and rear cameras that recorded constantly when the vehicle was running. I had a feeling I would need evidence of any future encounters with Patricia. My instinct proved correct. On February 3rd, exactly 1 week before the scheduled hearing, I was pulling into my driveway after work when I noticed Patricia standing on the sidewalk in front of my house with another woman I did not recognize. They were both staring at my property and taking notes on clipboards. I got out of my truck. "Can I help you ladies with something?" Patricia turned to me with an icy smile. "Just conducting a routine property inspection, Ryan. HOA business. You need to give 24 hours notice before inspecting a property. It is in the CC and Articus, Section 3.9. The other woman, younger than Patricia, maybe in her early 40s with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun, stepped forward. "We are not on your property. We are on the public sidewalk, which we have every right to use. I am Deborah Stanton, HOA Vice President. I know who you are. And I know you are looking for more violations to add to your fabricated list." Deborah's expression hardened. "I would be very careful about accusations like that. Slander can have serious consequences." "Truth is an absolute defense to slander," I replied. I had looked that up the night before. Patricia made a show of writing something on her clipboard. Noted, homeowner displays hostile attitude toward HOA representatives, creates intimidating environment. I almost laughed. "I asked you a simple question. That is not hostile or intimidating." "That is your interpretation," Patricia said. "We will see what the board thinks." They walked away, heads together, whispering. I watched them go, then checked my phone. The dashcam in my truck had been running and had captured the entire exchange on audio. I backed up the file immediately. The night of February 10th arrived cold and clear. The hearing was being held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that was used for HOA meetings and the occasional community event. I arrived 15 minutes early with a briefcase full of documents and a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The room was set up with a long table at the front where the 5 board members sat. Folding chairs were arranged in rows facing them. A few other residents were scattered in the audience, probably there for other HOA business. Patricia sat in the center of the board table, with Deborah to her right. The other 3 members looked less enthusiastic to be there. At 7 sharp, Patricia called the meeting to order. They went through some routine business first: approval of last month's minutes, a budget update, discussion of upcoming landscaping for the common areas. I waited, my leg bouncing nervously. Finally, Patricia announced, "Next on the agenda, we have a violation hearing for Ryan Edwards of 847 Clearwater Drive. Mr. Edwards, would you please come forward?" I walked to the front of the room, feeling like I was on trial. There was a single chair facing the board table. I sat down and placed my briefcase on the floor beside me. Patricia read the violations aloud, her voice formal and clipped. When she finished, she looked at me expectantly. "How do you plead to these violations?" "This is not a criminal court, Patricia. I am not pleading to anything. I am here to explain why these alleged violations are incorrect." Deborah leaned forward. "Mr. Edwards, this board is volunteering our time to manage this community. The least you can do is show some respect." "I am happy to show respect when I am treated fairly," I said. But these violations were issued 3 days after a car accident in which Patricia rear-ended my truck and then tried to blame me. The timing is not coincidental. That is a serious accusation, said Michael Porter, one of the other board members. He was a thin man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses. Do you have any proof of retaliation? I pulled out the timeline I had created. The accident occurred on January 15th. The police report, which I have here, clearly states that Patricia was at fault. I received the violation notice on January 18th, 3 days later. Prior to the accident, I had never received any violation notices in 3 years of living here. You have been in violation for months, Patricia interjected. I have been documenting issues with your property. I simply had not had time to issue formal notices yet. That is convenient, I said. Let's go through these one by one. I pulled out my copy of the CC and Articus. Violation 1. Unauthorized vehicle storage. Section 4.7 states that vehicles cannot be permanently stored in driveways for more than 72 consecutive hours. My truck is driven daily for work. It is not being stored, it is being parked. There is a significant legal difference. Your truck is too tall, Patricia said. It creates an eyesore. There is no height restriction in the CC and Articus for vehicles that are actively used. The restriction only applies to recreational vehicles, boats and trailers, which are specifically listed in Section 4.7. A standard pickup truck is not included. Christine Walsh, a woman in her 50s with graying brown hair, looked at her copy of the CC and Articus. He is right. I am looking at Section 4.7 now. It does not mention standard vehicles. Patricia shot her a look. The spirit of the rule is to maintain aesthetic standards. The spirit does not matter if it is not written in the document, I said. Violation 2. Lawn maintenance. Section 8.2 requires maintenance within 2 weeks of a violation. The dandelions you reference appeared in my lawn in late June. I treated and removed them within 1 week. I have lawn care service records to prove it. I pulled out the receipt from my lawn care company showing service on June 28th of the previous year. Violation 3. Waste container visibility. My garbage cans were returned to my side yard at 9 in the morning on the day in question. Pickup is at 6 in the morning. That is 3 hours, well within the 24-hour window specified in Section 11.3. Thomas Borg, the 5th board member and the youngest at maybe late 30s, raised his hand slightly. Patricia, did you personally observe these violations? I observed the garbage cans that afternoon, Patricia said. They were still visible from certain angles. But they were in his side yard, Thomas pressed. Technically, yes, but they could still be seen if you walked down the sidewalk on the south side of his property. The rule says visible from the street, I pointed out. My side yard is not visible from the street unless you walk onto the sidewalk on the side of my property, which requires you to be actively looking for the cans. That is not the spirit of the rule. Now you are the one talking about spirit, Patricia snapped. Let him finish, Michael said. What about the other 2 violations? Violation 4, failure to maintain driveway surface. There is no such requirement in the CC and Articus. I have read the entire document. There is no section about de-icing, snow removal from private property, or any related maintenance. Patricia added this violation to support her false narrative about the accident. It is a safety issue, Patricia argued. Your icy driveway contributed to the accident. The accident occurred in the street, not on my driveway, and the police report states that the primary factor was your speed combined with icy road conditions. Here is the report. I held up the document. It explicitly states that I was operating safely and you were at fault. The board members passed the police report between them, reading it carefully. I could see Patricia's jaw tightening. And the fifth violation, I continued, reckless operation of a motor vehicle. Again, the police report contradicts this. Officer Martinez wrote, and I quote, "Driver 1, that is me, was conducting a normal backing maneuver at low speed. Driver 2, that is Patricia, failed to maintain control and struck driver 1's vehicle from the rear. He cited Patricia for failure to maintain control, not me. This violation is completely fabricated. The room was silent except for the heating system humming. The three board members who were not Patricia or Deborah looked uncomfortable. Finally, Michael spoke up. Patricia, I am looking at this police report. It is pretty clear. You were cited, not Mr. Edwards. The officer was biased, Patricia said. He did not understand what happened. Or you are not accepting responsibility for causing an accident and are now retaliating against Mr. Edwards, Michael said. The bluntness of his statement surprised me. Patricia's face flushed. I resent that implication. It is not an implication, it is an observation based on the evidence, Michael said. We have a police report contradicting your account. We have CC and R provisions that do not support most of these violations. And we have a timeline showing these violations were issued immediately after an accident where you were at fault. This looks very bad. I agree, Christine said quietly. I do not feel comfortable upholding these violations. Deborah finally spoke up. You are both being manipulated. Ryan has clearly prepared for this hearing, probably with legal help. He is presenting a very one-sided view. One-sided because it is based on facts and official documents, I said. If you have contradictory evidence, please present it. She glared at me but said nothing. Thomas looked at his fellow board members. I move that we dismiss all 5 violations based on insufficient evidence and lack of support in the CC and RTCS. Second, Christine said immediately. Patricia looked panicked. We need to table this for more research. No, Michael said firmly. Let's vote. All in favor of dismissing the violations. Michael, Christine, and Thomas raised their hands. Patricia and Deborah kept theirs down. Motion passes 3-2, Michael announced. Mr. Edwards, your violations are dismissed and no fines will be assessed. I felt relief flood through me. Thank you. Patricia stood up abruptly. This meeting is adjourned. She gathered her papers and strode out of the room with Deborah hurrying after her. The 3 remaining board members looked at each other awkwardly. Michael turned to me. Ryan, I apologize for this situation. Patricia has been difficult lately. She takes the HOA responsibilities very seriously, sometimes too seriously. I appreciate you all reviewing the evidence fairly, I said. Watch yourself, Christine warned. Patricia does not handle being contradicted well. She might try something else. I will be careful. I left the clubhouse feeling vindicated but wary. Christine's warning echoed in my mind. This was not over, she was right. 2 weeks later, I received another certified letter. This time it was not from the HOA as a whole, but from Patricia personally, acting as HOA president. The letter informed me that she was conducting a comprehensive review of my property for compliance with all community standards. She would be performing a detailed inspection on February 28th and would be accompanied by qualified experts to assess various aspects of my property. I called Marcus immediately. Can she do that? I asked. Depends on what the CC and RTCS say about inspections. Read me the relevant section. I found section 3.9 and read it aloud. It stated that the HOA board could conduct reasonable inspections of properties with 24 hours written notice, but that inspections must be limited to visible exterior areas and could not include entry into the home without permission. Okay, so she can inspect the exterior of your property, Marcus said. But she has to give you 24 hours notice, which she did, and she cannot enter your home or any enclosed structures without your permission. My advice: be present during the inspection. Document everything. Record it if you can, and do not let her bait you into an argument. What is she looking for? Anything she can use against you. She is angry that the board overruled her. She is trying to find something, anything, to prove she was right about you. February 28th was a Saturday. I made sure to be home and ready. At 10 in the morning, Patricia arrived with 3 people. Deborah was there, of course. The other 2 were men I did not recognize. One carried a clipboard and a camera. The other had what looked like surveying equipment. I met them at my front walkway. "Good morning, Mr. Edwards," Patricia said curtly. "We are here to conduct the scheduled inspection. This is Robert Finch, a property assessment consultant, and David Monroe, a licensed surveyor. We will be examining your property for compliance with community standards." "I understand." "I will be observing the inspection." "That is not necessary. It is my property. I am staying." Patricia's lips thinned, but she did not argue. "Fine." For the next 2 hours, they examined every inch of my property's exterior. Robert took dozens of photographs of my house, my truck, my lawn, my fence, my mailbox, my garage door. David set up his surveying equipment and began taking measurements of my property boundaries and structures. I followed them quietly, recording everything on my phone. Patricia kept making comments to Robert that were clearly meant for me to hear. "Note the truck again. I am certain it violates aesthetic standards. The paint on the front door is not the approved color. It is too dark. The lawn has thin patches, poor maintenance. The mailbox post is leaning slightly. Safety hazard." After they finished the exterior, Patricia approached my front door. "We need to inspect the garage. The CC and Articus say you can only inspect visible exterior areas without permission. The garage interior is not a visible exterior area. We need to verify that you are not running a business out of your garage, which would violate commercial activity restrictions." "I am not running a business. You do not have permission to enter." Robert, the assessment consultant, spoke up for the first time. "Madam, if he is not giving permission, we cannot enter enclosed structures. That is standard protocol." Patricia looked furious but moved on. "Fine. We have everything we need anyway." They left shortly after. I immediately backed up the video recording to my computer and cloud storage. 3 days later, another certified letter arrived. This one contained 11 new violations. They were grasping at straws. Unapproved front door color, even though my door was dark green, a standard color in the neighborhood. Mailbox structural instability, for a mailbox that had a slight lean due to frost heave, something that affected half the mailboxes in the neighborhood every winter. Vehicle aesthetic violation, trying again with my truck. Lawn density below standards for some thin patches of grass that were completely normal for Idaho winters. The list went on. Each violation carried a $250 fine. The total was $2,750. This time I did not even try to handle it myself. I forwarded everything to Marcus. He called me back within an hour. "Ryan, this is harassment, clear-cut harassment. She is abusing her position to target you personally. We are going to file a complaint with the HOA board and potentially seek legal action if this continues." Marcus drafted a detailed letter to the HOA board, with copies to all 5 members. The letter outlined the pattern of harassment, the bogus violations, and the retaliation following a car accident where Patricia was at fault. He demanded that the new violations be dismissed immediately, and that Patricia recuse herself from any further HOA matters involving my property. He also put the board on notice that continued harassment could result in legal action for abuse of process and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The response came not from Patricia, but from Michael Porter. He called me directly. "Ryan, I got the letter from your attorney. I want you to know that Christine, Thomas, and I are very concerned about what is happening. We are calling an emergency board meeting to address this situation." "I appreciate that, Michael. This has gotten out of hand. I know. Between you and me, Patricia has been a problem for a while. She takes everything personally, and she has a vindictive streak. We have been trying to work with her, but this situation with you is beyond the pale. We are going to take action." The emergency board meeting was held on March 7th. This time, Marcus came with me. The atmosphere in the clubhouse was tense. Patricia and Deborah sat on one side of the table, looking defensive. Michael, Christine, and Thomas sat on the other side, looking determined. Michael called the meeting to order. "We are here to discuss the ongoing situation between HOA President Patricia Hendricks and homeowner Ryan Edwards. Patricia, we have received multiple complaints about your conduct, and we have reviewed the violations you have issued to Mr. Edwards. We have serious concerns." "I am doing my job," Patricia said coldly, "enforcing the CC and Articus that this community agreed to follow. You are selectively enforcing rules against one homeowner in a pattern that suggests retaliation," Christine said. "I drove through the neighborhood yesterday. I counted 14 mailboxes with similar or worse lien than Ryan's. I counted 7 vehicles similar in size to his truck parked in driveways. I counted dozens of properties with thin winter grass. Yet he is the only one receiving violation notices for these things." "I am working my way through the neighborhood," Patricia argued. "In the 3 months since the accident, you have issued violation notices to exactly one homeowner, Ryan Edwards," Thomas said. "You have issued 0 violations to anyone else. That is not working your way through the neighborhood." "That is targeting," Deborah spoke up. "Patricia has been dealing with an uncooperative homeowner who caused an accident and then refused to take responsibility." Marcus set a copy of the police report on the table. "The official police report states clearly that Miss Hendricks rear-ended my client's vehicle and was cited for failure to maintain control. Your characterization is factually incorrect and potentially defamatory." "That report is wrong," Patricia insisted. "You can believe that if you want," Marcus said, "but it is the official record. And the pattern of behavior since that accident constitutes harassment and abuse of process. My client has complied with all legitimate HOA rules. These frivolous violations are causing him financial stress, emotional distress, and damage to his reputation in the community." Michael looked at Patricia directly. "I am going to be blunt. Your conduct is exposing the HOA to legal liability. If Mr. Edwards sues, and he would have grounds to sue, the HOA's insurance might not cover it because you are acting outside the scope of your authority. That means the HOA and potentially the board members individually could be financially liable." That got everyone's attention. Deborah looked nervous for the first time. "We need to resolve this before it goes any further," Christine said. "I move that we dismiss all pending violations against Ryan Edwards and issue a formal apology for the improper enforcement actions." "Second," Thomas said immediately. "We also need to address Patricia's role," Michael added. "I am concerned about her ability to continue as president given this situation." Patricia stood up suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "You cannot remove me. I was elected by the community." "We can hold a vote of no confidence," Michael said, "or you can resign voluntarily." I am not resigning. I have done nothing wrong. Then we will vote, Michael said. But first, let's vote on dismissing the violations. All in favor, Michael, Christine, and Thomas raised their hands. Motion passes. Ryan, all pending violations are dismissed and you owe no fines. Thank you, I said. Now, Michael continued, I move that we hold a vote of no confidence in Patricia Hendricks as HOA president based on abuse of authority, selective enforcement, harassment of a homeowner, and exposure of the HOA to legal liability. Second, Christine said. Patricia's face was bright red. This is a witch hunt. You are all turning on me because of this man's lies and manipulation. Patricia, you rear-ended his truck and then spent 3 months trying to punish him for it, Thomas said. This is not complicated. All in favor of the vote of no confidence? Michael asked. 3 hands went up. Patricia and Deborah sat with their arms crossed. The vote of no confidence passes. Patricia, you are removed as HOA president effective immediately. Per our bylaws, the vice president assumes the role until the next election. Patricia grabbed her belongings and stormed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back to me. You have not won. I still live in this neighborhood. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Is that a threat? Marcus asked. Because if you continue to harass my client, we will seek a restraining order and pursue legal action for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She left without responding, slamming the door behind her. Deborah looked at the remaining board members. I assume you want my resignation as well. That is your choice, Michael said. But you need to decide if you are going to continue Patricia's vendetta or if you are going to work with this board constructively. She stood up. I resign. I do not want to be part of a board that caves to legal threats. After she left, the 3 remaining board members looked exhausted. I am sorry it came to that, Michael said to me, but it had to be done. Patricia has been increasingly problematic, and you were not her first target. Just the most recent and most extreme. Who else has she gone after? I asked. A couple who painted their house a color she did not like, even though it was on the approved list. A single dad whose teenage son's car was not in perfect condition. An elderly woman whose lawn care was not up to Patricia's standards, because the woman could not physically do the work herself anymore, Christine said. We managed to resolve those situations quietly, but we should have dealt with Patricia then. I am sorry we let it get this far with you. I appreciate you all doing the right thing, I said. Marcus and I left the meeting feeling cautiously optimistic. The HOA situation seemed resolved. But Patricia's parting words nagged at me. Over the next week, I learned what she meant. Patricia began a whisper campaign in the neighborhood. She told anyone who would listen that I had caused the accident with my reckless driving, that I was a troublemaker who had gotten the board to unfairly remove her, that I was a threat to property values and neighborhood safety. Some neighbors clearly did not believe her. Bill Morrison actually came over to apologize for what I was dealing with. Janet Chen, who had been hesitant to contradict Patricia at first, brought me homemade cookies and said she was sorry for not speaking up sooner. But others seemed to buy into Patricia's narrative. I started getting cold stares from people I did not know well. Someone left a nasty note on my truck windshield calling me a liar and a menace. Another note appeared in my mailbox saying I should move out before I destroyed the neighborhood. I documented everything and forwarded it to Marcus. This might be enough for a restraining order, he said. But you would have to prove Patricia is behind the notes, and that could be tricky. Then, on March 21st, I was backing out of my driveway to go to work when a car came flying down the street and slammed on its brakes right behind me, horn blaring. I stopped immediately and put my truck in park. The driver's door of the car opened and a man I did not recognize got out, red-faced and angry. "What the hell are you doing?" he shouted at me. "You almost hit me." I got out of my truck. My dashcam was recording everything. I was backing out slowly. "You came down the street at high speed. You did not even look. I could have been killed." A crowd was starting to gather. I saw Patricia emerge from her house 3 doors down, a satisfied look on her face. "Sir, I was going maybe 2 miles per hour. You had plenty of time to stop or go around me." "Why were you going so fast in a residential area?" "I was not going fast. You are a reckless driver. I have heard all about you." And there it was. "Who told you about me?" He hesitated, realizing he had said too much. "That does not matter. You need to learn how to drive safely." "I have a dashcam," I said calmly. "It recorded this entire incident. Would you like me to call the police so we can review it?" His anger deflated slightly. "There was no accident, just watch where you are going." He got back in his car and drove off. I looked at Patricia. She was no longer looking satisfied. She had retreated back toward her front door. I called Marcus from my truck. "She is putting people up to this. She is manufacturing incidents to make me look like a dangerous driver." "Can you prove it?" "I have it on camera." The guy admitted he had heard about me, and Patricia was watching the whole thing from her house. "That is not quite proof she orchestrated it, but it is getting close. If this happens again, call the police immediately and get an official report. We need documentation." It happened again 3 days later. This time a woman I had never met accidentally walked behind my truck while I was backing out, then screamed like I had almost hit her even though I was still completely stationary. Again, Patricia was conveniently watching from her yard. Again, my dashcam captured everything, showing I had stopped the moment I saw the woman and was nowhere close to hitting her. This time I did call the police. Officer Martinez responded, and I was grateful to see a familiar face. "Mr. Edwards," he said. "Another incident." I showed him the dashcam footage. "This is the second staged incident in 3 days. The woman walked behind my truck deliberately and then claimed I almost hit her. My neighbor Patricia Hendricks, who I had that accident with in January, has been watching both times." He reviewed the footage carefully. "Do you still have the footage from the other incident?" "Yes, I have everything saved. Send me copies of both. This looks like harassment. You know the woman who walked behind your truck? Never seen her before in my life." He walked over to where a small group of neighbors had gathered, including Patricia. I saw him speaking to several people, taking notes. The woman who had been behind my truck was gone. Officer Martinez came back to me. "No one admits to knowing who that woman was. Miss Hendricks claims she just happened to be outside and heard the commotion. But this pattern is concerning. I am going to write up a report, and I strongly suggest you talk to your attorney about getting a restraining order." "I will, thank you, officer." After he left, I sent the dashcam footage to Marcus along with a detailed email about both incidents. His response came within an hour. "That's enough. We're filing for a restraining order first thing Monday morning." Monday morning, March 27th, Marcus filed a petition for a civil harassment restraining order against Patricia Hendricks. The petition outlined the entire history: the accident, the bogus HOA violations, the removal as HOA president, the whisper campaign, and the 2 staged incidents involving third parties. We attached the police reports, the dashcam footage, the violation notices, and statements from Bill Morrison and Michael Porter confirming Patricia's pattern of behavior. The court granted a temporary restraining order and set a hearing for April 14th to determine if it should be made permanent. A process server delivered the order to Patricia on March 29th. She responded by filing a counter-petition, claiming that I was the one harassing her. She alleged that I had caused the original accident, that I had defamed her to the HOA board, resulting in her removal as president, and that I was conducting a campaign to damage her reputation in the neighborhood. Her petition was almost entirely fabricated. The hearing arrived faster than I expected. Marcus and I sat on one side of the courtroom. Patricia sat on the other side with an attorney she had hired, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit named Gregory Walsh. The judge, a woman in her early 60s named Judge Carolyn Foster, reviewed both petitions before the hearing began. When she called the case, she looked at both parties seriously. "This appears to be a dispute that has escalated significantly," she said. "Mr. Webb, you are petitioning for a restraining order on behalf of your client, Mr. Edwards. Please present your case." Marcus stood and walked through the entire timeline methodically. He presented the police report from the original accident, showing Patricia was at fault. He presented the violation notices and the timeline showing they began immediately after the accident. He presented the HOA board meeting minutes showing Patricia was removed for abuse of authority. He presented the dashcam footage of the two staged incidents. And he presented statements from multiple neighbors describing Patricia's behavior. "Your Honor, this is a clear pattern of harassment and retaliation. My client was involved in a traffic accident where Miss Hendricks was at fault. Instead of accepting responsibility, she has spent 3 months trying to punish him using her authority as HOA president, and, after she was removed from that position, by orchestrating incidents designed to make him appear to be a dangerous driver. This has caused my client significant distress and has created a hostile living environment." Judge Foster looked at Patricia's attorney. "Mr. Walsh, your response." Gregory Walsh stood. He was smooth and professional, but I could tell he was working with weak material. "Your Honor, my client denies any wrongdoing. The HOA violations were legitimate enforcement of community rules. My client's removal as HOA president was politically motivated by a board faction that disagreed with her strict interpretation of the bylaws. As for the alleged staged incidents, there is no proof that my client had anything to do with them. She happened to be outside her home on both occasions, but that is not evidence of orchestration." "What about the accident?" Judge Foster asked. "The police report clearly indicates your client was at fault. My client disputes the police officer's conclusions. She believes Mr. Edwards was driving recklessly, and the officer made an incorrect determination. So your client's position is that the police officer was wrong, the HOA board was wrong, and all of these neighbors who have provided statements are wrong." The judge's skepticism was evident. My client has a different perspective on these events. Judge Foster turned to Patricia. "Miss Hendricks, do you have anything you would like to say?" Patricia stood up. "Your Honor, I have been a dedicated member of my community for 15 years. I have volunteered countless hours to keep our neighborhood beautiful and safe. Mr. Edwards moved in 3 years ago and has been a problem from the start. He does not respect the rules. He drives recklessly, and when I tried to hold him accountable, he turned the other board members against me and got me removed. Now, he is using the legal system to continue his campaign of harassment against me." "Do you have any evidence to support your claims?" Judge Foster asked. "I have photographs of his violations. I have my own documentation of events. I have reviewed your documentation. Most of it appears to be photographs of a truck parked in a driveway and some minor lawn issues. That is not evidence of harassment or reckless behavior." Patricia's confidence wavered. "He almost hit people twice in 1 week. That is dangerous." The dashcam footage shows Mr. Edwards's truck completely stopped in both incidents, Judge Foster said. It does not show dangerous driving. What it does potentially show is people deliberately creating the appearance of near misses. I had nothing to do with that, perhaps not directly. But the pattern here is concerning, Miss Hendricks. You were involved in an accident where you were at fault. You then issued a series of questionable violations against Mr. Edwards. When that did not work, and you were removed from your HOA position, these incidents began happening. You were present or nearby for both. At a minimum, it appears you have been spreading negative information about Mr. Edwards in the neighborhood, which could have motivated others to act. Gregory Walsh stood up again. Your Honor, my client exercising her First Amendment right to discuss her concerns about a neighbor is not grounds for a restraining order. There is a line between expressing concerns and conducting a defamatory campaign that creates a hostile environment, Judge Foster responded. Based on the evidence presented, I am granting the restraining order. Miss Hendricks, you are prohibited from contacting Mr. Edwards directly or indirectly. You are to stay at least 100 yards away from him, except when such contact is unavoidable due to living in the same neighborhood. In those cases, you are to have no interaction with him. You are prohibited from posting about him on social media or discussing him with other neighbors. And you are prohibited from filing any further HOA violations against his property unless there is a clear, documented violation witnessed by multiple board members. This order will remain in effect for 3 years. Do you understand? Patricia looked like she had been slapped. This is not fair. You are taking away my freedom of speech. I am preventing you from harassing your neighbor. There is a significant difference. If you violate this order, you will be held in contempt of court, which can result in fines and jail time. Do you understand? Yes, Patricia said through gritted teeth. Court is adjourned. As we left the courtroom, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Marcus clapped me on the back. That went about as well as it could have. Do you think she will actually follow the order? She better. Judge Foster does not mess around with contempt. If Patricia violates that order, she will face serious consequences. Life in the neighborhood gradually returned to normal over the next few months. Patricia kept to herself, avoiding me completely. The new HOA board, with Deborah gone and Michael as the new president, was reasonable and fair. They even apologized formally in the neighborhood newsletter for the overzealous enforcement actions of the previous administration, though they did not name Patricia specifically. My truck was repaired using Patricia's insurance, though her insurance company tried to deny the claim at first. Marcus sent them the police report and a letter threatening bad faith litigation, and they paid out within a week. I thought the story was over. But then, on July 9th, almost 6 months after the original accident, I received a call from Officer Martinez. Mr. Edwards, I need to talk to you about Patricia Hendricks. Are you available to come down to the station? My heart sank. What happened? I would rather discuss it in person. Can you come in this afternoon? I agreed and drove to the Boys Police Department headquarters downtown. Officer Martinez met me in the lobby and led me to a small conference room. Is Patricia okay? I asked, despite everything feeling a twinge of concern. She is in custody, Officer Martinez said. She was arrested this morning for insurance fraud and filing a false police report. I stared at him. What? After the restraining order was issued, she apparently became fixated on proving that you were at fault for the accident. She hired a private investigator to dig into your background, looking for anything she could use. When that did not turn up anything useful, she started fabricating evidence. She created fake witness statements claiming they had seen you driving recklessly. She doctored photographs to make it look like you had been speeding. She even filed a false police report claiming you had violated the restraining order by driving aggressively near her house. That's insane. It gets worse. She submitted all of this fake evidence to her insurance company, trying to get them to reverse their decision and deny your claim. She also contacted several other insurance companies, trying to get your auto insurance rates increased or your policy canceled by providing false information about your driving history. Can she do that much damage? She tried. Fortunately, her insurance company's fraud investigation unit caught on. They noticed inconsistencies in her evidence and reported it to us. We investigated and discovered the whole scheme. The fake witness statements were from people who do not exist. The doctored photographs had obvious editing artifacts, and the false police report was contradicted by your dashcam footage and GPS data from your truck. She really could not let it go. Some people can't. The obsession consumed her. She is being charged with insurance fraud, filing false police reports, and attempted fraud. She is looking at serious jail time if convicted. What do you need from me? We need you to testify about the harassment pattern and provide copies of any documentation you have. Your attorney already gave us a lot of it, but we want to make sure we have everything. I provided everything I had, all the emails, letters, photographs, dashcam footage, and recorded interactions. The district attorney built a comprehensive case. Patricia's trial took place in October. Marcus attended with me for support, though I was not allowed in the courtroom until after I testified since I was a witness. When I was called to the stand, I walked through the entire saga from the beginning. The accident, the HOA violations, the staged incidents, the restraining order, and everything in between. Patricia's attorney tried to paint me as vindictive, as someone who had blown a minor fender bender out of proportion and ruined an innocent woman's life. But the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution had the fake witness statements, the doctored photos, the fraudulent insurance claims, and testimony from the insurance fraud investigators. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. They found Patricia guilty on all counts. At sentencing in November, the judge was harsh. Miss Hendricks, you allowed a minor traffic accident, which was your own fault, to spiral into an obsessive campaign of harassment and fraud. You abused your position of authority in your community. You defamed your neighbor. You wasted law enforcement resources with false reports. And you attempted to defraud multiple insurance companies. Your actions demonstrate a complete lack of remorse and a willingness to harm others to avoid taking responsibility for your mistakes. I am sentencing you to 2 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of probation. You will also be required to pay restitution to Mr. Edwards for his legal fees and to the insurance companies for their investigation costs. Patricia showed emotion for the first time, breaking down in tears as the sentence was read. Her attorney immediately filed a notice of appeal, but Marcus told me it was unlikely to succeed given the strength of the evidence. As I left the courthouse that day, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. Relief that the nightmare was finally, truly over. Sadness that it had gone so far, that Patricia had destroyed her own life over something so trivial. If she had just accepted responsibility for rear-ending my truck on that icy January morning, none of this would have happened. But pride and obsession had led her down a path that ended with a prison sentence. The neighborhood slowly healed. The HOA under Michael's leadership was efficient and fair. People stopped talking about the drama. Patricia's house was eventually sold, the proceeds going toward her restitution payments and legal fees. I never did learn the full reason for Patricia's fixation on me. Maybe she had always been that way, and I was just the unlucky target. Maybe something else was going on in her life that made her lash out. In the end, it did not matter. What mattered was that justice had been served and I could live in peace in my own home. On a cold morning in January, almost exactly 1 year after the accident, I was backing out of my driveway to go to work. The roads were icy again, salt trucks running their routes. I backed out slowly, carefully, checking all my mirrors. A car approached on the street and slowed down, waving me out. I waved back in thanks and pulled onto the road. It was such a normal, mundane interaction. The way it should have been from the beginning. The way it would be from now on. I drove to work thinking about how a single moment, a single rear-end collision on an icy road, had spiraled into months of conflict, legal battles, and ultimately a criminal conviction. It was a reminder of how important it is to take responsibility for our actions, to let go of pride and accept when we are wrong. Patricia had chosen a different path, and it had cost her everything. As for me, I continued living in my house on Clearwater Drive. I parked my truck in my driveway every night. I kept my lawn maintained and my garbage cans properly stored. I attended the occasional HOA meeting when something important was being discussed. I was just another resident of Meadowbrook Hills, living a quiet, normal life. And every time I backed out of my driveway, I was grateful for the dashcam that had captured the truth, for the neighbors who had spoken up, for the board members who had done the right thing, and for a legal system that ultimately held people accountable for their actions. The whole experience had been exhausting and frustrating, but it had also restored my faith that truth and justice could prevail, even against someone determined to twist reality to fit their narrative. Sometimes, I wondered what Patricia thought about during her time in prison, whether she ever acknowledged to herself that she had been wrong, that the accident had been her fault, that her campaign against me had been unjustified. I hoped she found some peace and learned something from the experience. But I would never know, and that was fine with me. The restraining order remained in effect, though it was largely symbolic now with Patricia in prison, and her eventual release still years away. When she did get out, I would no longer live in the same neighborhood as her. Her house had been sold and she would have no reason to return to Meadowbrook Hills. Life moved on. I met someone, a woman named Emily Lawson, who worked as a teacher at one of the local elementary schools. We started dating in the spring, and she was understanding and supportive when I told her the whole story about Patricia and the HOA drama. She laughed at the absurdity of it all and told me her own horror stories about difficult parents and school board politics. By summer, Emily and I were serious. She moved into my house on Clearwater Drive in August. We talked about getting married someday, maybe having kids. The house that had been the center of so much conflict became a home filled with love and laughter. The neighborhood embraced Emily warmly. Bill Morrison joked that it was about time I settled down. Janet Chen invited us both over for dinner multiple times. Even Michael from the HOA board congratulated me and said he was happy to see me moving forward with my life after everything that had happened. One evening in September, Emily and I were sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the Idaho sky in shades of orange and pink. She leaned against me and said, "You know, I am glad all that crazy stuff happened before we met. I get to enjoy the peaceful version of life here." I laughed. "Trust me, I am glad too. I do not ever want to go through anything like that again. Do you think about her, Patricia?" "Sometimes. Mostly I just feel sorry for her. She had a nice life, a position of respect in the community, and she threw it all away because she could not admit she made a mistake. That is the part I cannot understand. It was just a car accident. They happen every day. Pride is a powerful thing. And once she started down that path, every step made it harder to turn back. The HOA violations, the staged incidents, the fraud, it all built on itself. She probably felt like she was too far in to admit she had been wrong from the beginning. Still, 2 years in prison. That is a high price to pay for not saying sorry. It is. But that is what happens when you double down on a lie and keep making it worse. The cover-up becomes worse than the crime. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky darken. Somewhere in the neighborhood, children were playing, their laughter carrying on the evening air. A dog barked. A car drove by slowly. Normal sounds of suburban life. "I am happy here," Emily said. "I am happy with you." "I am happy too," and I was. The entire ordeal with Patricia had been a nightmare, but it had taught me valuable lessons about standing up for yourself, documenting everything, and not backing down in the face of bullying and harassment. It had also taught me about community, about how important it is to have neighbors and friends who will support you and speak the truth. The HOA, under proper leadership, was actually a good thing for the neighborhood. Michael and the board focused on genuine community improvement rather than petty enforcement. They organized neighborhood events, maintained the common areas beautifully, and addressed real issues promptly and fairly. It was what an HOA should be, a way for neighbors to work together for everyone's benefit, not a tool for one person to exert control and punish people they did not like. In December, I received a letter from the Department of Corrections. Patricia was up for early release consideration, and I had the right to submit a statement to the parole board. I thought about it for several days. Part of me wanted to write a lengthy statement opposing her release, detailing everything she had put me through. But another part of me just wanted to be done with it all. In the end, I wrote a brief statement. I acknowledged what had happened and the impact it had on me. But I also said that I believed in redemption and second chances, that I hoped Patricia had used her time in prison to reflect and grow, and that I would not oppose her release as long as she continued to stay away from me and my property, per the restraining order. I wished her well in rebuilding her life. Marcus reviewed my statement before I submitted it and nodded approvingly. "That is classy. You are taking the high road. I do not want to be the kind of person who holds a grudge forever. She has paid her debt to society, or she will have by the time she is released. What she does after that is up to her." Patricia was granted early release in March, having served about 16 months of her 2-year sentence. I received a notification that she had been released and had moved to Twin Falls, about 2 hours south of Boise. She would not be returning to our neighborhood. The restraining order would remain in effect for the next 1.5 years, and her probation conditions prohibited her from contacting me or coming within 100 yards of my property. I felt nothing when I received the notification. No anger, no fear, no satisfaction, just a sense of closure. That chapter of my life was finally, completely closed. Emily and I got engaged in April. We planned a small wedding for the fall, right there in Meadowbrook Hills. We would get married in the community park, the same common area that Patricia had once obsessed over maintaining to her exact standards. There was something poetic about that, about taking a space that had been part of so much conflict and filling it with joy and celebration. Bill Morrison agreed to officiate since he was licensed as a wedding officiant. Janet Chen helped Emily plan the details. Michael and his wife offered to host the reception in their backyard. The neighborhood that had been divided by Patricia's vendetta came together to celebrate new beginnings. On a perfect Saturday in October, Emily and I stood in the community park surrounded by friends, family, and neighbors, and promised to love each other for the rest of our lives. The sun was shining, the trees were ablaze with fall colors, and everything was exactly as it should be. As Bill pronounced us husband and wife, I looked around at the community that had supported me through one of the most difficult periods of my life. I thought about how different things could have been if Patricia had just taken responsibility for a simple accident on an icy January morning. But I also thought about how, despite everything, good had prevailed. Truth had won out over lies, community had triumphed over division, and life had moved forward in beautiful, unexpected ways. Emily kissed me, and everyone cheered. We walked back down the aisle hand in hand, ready to start our new life together. The nightmare with Patricia and the HOA was truly behind us now, just a story we would tell someday about the crazy thing that happened when we first got together. That evening, during the reception, Bill pulled me aside. "Ryan, I have been meaning to tell you something. You handled that whole situation with more grace and patience than most people would have. You stood up for yourself without becoming vindictive. You let the system work. And you came out the other side as a better person. I am proud to know you. Thank you, Bill. I could not have done it without support from neighbors like you." That is what community is supposed to be about, having each other's backs. Patricia forgot that. She thought being HOA president made her a dictator rather than a servant, but you reminded us all what it means to be good neighbors. As the party continued into the evening, I realized that Bill was right. The whole ordeal had not just been about one difficult person causing problems. It had been about how a community responds to conflict, how neighbors choose to treat each other, and how important it is to stand up for what is right even when it is difficult. Patricia had tried to use the HOA as a weapon, but in the end, the system had worked the way it was supposed to. The board had checked her power, the legal system had held her accountable, and the community had come together to support justice and fairness. I never heard from or about Patricia again after her release. She rebuilt her life somewhere else, away from Meadowbrook Hills and away from me. I genuinely hoped she had learned from her mistakes and found some peace. But whether she had or not, it was no longer my concern. Emily and I built a wonderful life in our house on Clearwater Drive. We eventually had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, who grew up playing in the streets of Meadowbrook Hills with the neighborhood children. We became active in the community, volunteering for HOA projects and neighborhood events. I even served on the HOA board for a few years, working to make sure the organization remained fair and reasonable. Sometimes, on cold January mornings when the roads were icy, I would back out of my driveway extra carefully, remembering that day years ago when a simple fender bender changed my life. But mostly, I just lived, grateful for my family, my home, my community, and the lessons I had learned about truth, justice, and the importance of taking responsibility for our actions. The story of Patricia Hendricks and the HOA drama became neighborhood legend, a cautionary tale told to new residents about what happens when power goes to someone's head and when people refuse to admit their mistakes. But for me, it was more than just a story. It was a reminder that even in the darkest situations, standing up for what is right and letting truth prevail will ultimately lead to justice. And that was worth every difficult moment, every legal battle, every ounce of stress and frustration. Because in the end, I had not just defended my property rights or won a legal case. I had defended the principle that people should be held accountable for their actions, that truth matters more than convenience, and that communities are strongest when they stand up for fairness and justice. As I watched my children play in the same streets where all that drama had unfolded, I smiled. They would grow up in a neighborhood where the HOA worked properly, where neighbors treated each other with respect, and where conflicts were resolved fairly rather than through bullying and harassment. That was Patricia's unintended legacy. By being such a terrible example of leadership, she had taught the entire community what not to do and had inspired us all to be better neighbors. The ice on the road that January morning had been treacherous and dangerous, causing a collision that set off months of conflict. But we had all learned to navigate more carefully, to drive with more caution, and to treat each other with more respect. And in the end, that made Meadowbrook Hills a better place to live. The story was over. The chapter was closed. Life went on, as it always does, moving forward into new adventures and new challenges. But the lessons remained, carved into memory like tracks in ice, permanent reminders of what happens when we choose pride over truth, and what happens when we choose to stand up for what is right no matter how difficult the path may be.